Goodness.
Oh my, this is a family reunion, you know?
There's nothing I could add to what's already been said today. This really is, I love hearing every single journey because there's so much similarity and so much difference. You can't explain it to anybody outside this room. And I'm Bob McLaurine. I'm from the Nashville area. 50 years in the church, and I liked it. It really did. It was a very positive experience. My kids grew up in it. One of them lives here. My mom took us to what we call grace churches. And looking back, it was more of, they just didn't preach a altar call every single message. That's what grace was. It was a little more teaching around the Bible, but hell was still there, and but you didn't have to hear it every time. And there were some really great pastors, incredible youth pastors that that are still in our extended circles today, and dearly appreciate what God has done through them, and grew up with full awareness of what grace, grace in quotes is. And I'm not saying that negatively. I knew that there was nothing I could do to help myself, and yet I had no peace for 50 years.
Wow.
I was only as good, I was just like the stock market. I was only as good as how I felt I was in stacking up against what God's expectation was. Even though all you hear is like, you got to bring nothing, it's just, he did all this, and yet there was always something I had to, I just never felt that peace. And, when people ask you what your hobbies are, I can't really say, because mine are like, well, I like watching YouTube videos of preachers. Yet people think you're crazy. And as it was 10 years ago, I'm sitting there. There were a couple of things I would question, but nothing of seriousness. I mean, I thought, like, how in the world could anybody justify slavery in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s with the Word? And you just got to extend grace to where people are and all that. But I was like, it just made me think, like, what else are we missing? If they could justify that in their time, what am I missing? But still, I'm good with hell. I'm content with how it was being taught. But when you're in that mind frame, it's you put the oxygen mask on first. Your kids and all that. I mean, because you cannot afford to go to hell for trillions of years. And yet, how messed up is that you put yourself, you have to. You put yourself in front of your spouse, your kids, out of survival mode. You can't even care for your neighbor until you're secure. And so you're either living in complete denial. That's how you play it. You got to just not even look at it.
Right.
You're in denial, or you have no peace whatsoever. And I would just ping pong. And I was a serious student of the Bible. I loved the Word. I loved hearing true teachers teach about it, even those who aren't where we are today. And 10 years ago, it's a Friday night. What a way to spend a Friday night. But it's what I loved. And I'm watching Steve McVeigh, who I didn't have a clue who he was. I didn't know if he was a pastor or what, but he was talking about the Day of Atonement for Israel, and how their sacrifice would cover, not the past. See, I didn't know anything, but he was explaining that the sacrifice that their whole work for that feast or day or whatever, that's how uneducated I am about all the Hebrew feast, but it was for the coming year. It's like writing that blank check for sin in advance. And I was like, what? How is that possible? Like anything? It's like, God, like, it's like, here's my checkbook. It's covered. And I'm like, how is that possible? And then he goes and reads, he starts quoting Corinthians 15:22. Mark went through them all. And he wasn't even teaching salvation at all. He didn't believe them. And I checked like 3 weeks ago, and no slam on him. He's God's instrument. But the second they left his lips, I was not seeking this. I had no desire to get out of this restlessness of dealing with, am I going to go to hell? Am I in enough grace? How do you even think that way? Not looking for it at all. In the millisecond those verses left his lips, it hit me in the gut, and I knew it was all true. It was all true. And I was like, what? What? And I spent the next 6 months, actually like 3 months later, I go to Atlanta to a Steve McVeigh conference. Like, you got to tell me, it was called like Beyond an Angry God, and they would walk right up to the line and not go over, and I'm like, oh, come on, man. And so I danced with that for like 6 months. I went through the, fudge stuff, the annihilation. I'm willing, and even today, I'm willing to listen to anybody. Just bring the scripture. If you can show me in scripture, and that's my heart. Wherever the truth is, I have to be willing to go there. If the truth is there's a hell, as we've been taught our whole life, if that's true, then we're obligated to go there. But we know that's not the truth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that. And so I was walking in, I gotta go. I gotta pursue this, but I desperately do not want to be deceived. And, I'm telling God that. Don't deceive me, God. But I spent a year, and then I end up a year later at Clyde's house, spent the weekend with him, and like, look at this. Of course, he's been in it 25 years by then. Like, yeah, okay, pup. Settle down. Can you believe this? And same that y'all have all said, like, when you hear it, even though you hear people like, they're not going to want to hear it, don't bother, and you're out running around like, can you believe this? And you get shut down by the closest, kindest people. The fangs come out. And that was kind of like, holy cow, I guess it's true. And then I told Clyde this last night, but I embraced that being alone, but never being lonely. I never felt more full and complete and at rest, instantaneous rest and peace, and have been ever since. But I continually claw at Paul he throws out so much truth. It's like 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. And you look at it and it's like just casually having a conversation in a letter. It's like, I saw one, I've seen it before, but I was just camping on it last week. He says, where there's no law, there's no imputation of sin. I'm thinking, well, if you're a Gentile, you could have, and yet death reigns. So that's the full truth that Christianity can't deal with is, sin will wreck your life. We all have experienced that. But it's not on your account, and it never was. The law, you were never under the law. And even for Jews, you could make an argument for like 70 AD, but we could take it to the cross and go from Moses to the cross. That's the only group of people that have ever had to deal with the law. And even the heathens, the pagans and Gentiles outside of that group during that time, living it up. Those foul people. And yet, and death reigned, didn't it? It still reigns. Sin still has an impact, but it's not on our account. It never was. And so early on when I would run to somebody, what do I get?
You got to do the math.
Oh, so I think I got like 4 minutes. Okay. So early on, when I would naively tell a pastor that I thought was open to the truth, and I still get bit by this occasionally, but I would tell them this, and what they thought they heard me say was, "You're forgiven of your sin, but you haven't asked for that forgiveness of your sin, and therefore you're still going to pay for it." And I'm just thinking, how can you not see the truth? And we know why now. I mean, it's just more and more evidence that it has to be God blinding. It has to be. I mean, you can set the table right out of Scripture, and they'll go, yeah, I believe that, I believe that, I believe that. 1 + 1 is 3. They cannot get it, and they will not get it. And so, to wrap up, where I've been living lately is just on these incredible truths of Paul. And if you look at archaeology, for whatever reason they had mosaics everywhere. Like they would just walk on these incredible works of art that looked like it would take years to build. And our archaeologists uncover them, in Turkey and places. And you're like, it's just this priceless art. And you look at them and it's like an Atari 8-bit icon, you know what I mean? Like real rough edges and stuff. It's not 4K. It's like watching standard def Andy Griffith on a 4K. It's unwatchable. It's unwatchable because it's all it's blurry and stuff. But this mosaic that Paul and other Scripture, the other writers have painted, but I'm stuck on Paul. As you zoom in, each one of those tiles has just the most incredible truth there. And it's like they're just random, but incredible stuff like the one who has died. And in the English, in most English translations, they just put it in parentheses, like Paul's just like, oh, by the way. It's like the one who's died has been freed from sin. And the word there is justified. The one who's died. You mean anybody who's died? You mean everybody who's going to die? So, and then you go to Corinthians and it says, we thus conclude if one died for all, then all died. So you can't get around this, well, that's a spiritual death. That's a physical death. It's like, if one died for all have died. Already. And so, now you tie that to the one who's died has been justified from sin. And then you wrap that, then you throw that bone in of, it's crazy, isn't it? You throw in the, what did I mention earlier? There's no sin on your account where there's no law. So at least for 2,000 years, nobody's got anything in their bank account. How in the world do you get through that gauntlet to, I'm getting to hell no matter what? It ain't happening. And I'm all about judgment. I spent months I got to know what judgment is, and I'm content with what that is. But it's just a great Father, the greatest Father of all time.
Yes, yes.
And He's going to correct us for our good. He's going to pat us on the back for our good. He's not Santa Claus. He's just the greatest Father of all time.
Yes, he is.
So I'm done with that. I've said